The 1950s were supposed to be the decade of progress, white picket fences, shiny new automobiles, the American dream wrapped in cellophane and sold at a discount. But underneath all that post-war optimism, something darker was crawling through the culture. So Hollywood did what Hollywood does best. It turned that fear into monsters. Now here's what most people get wrong about 1950s sci-fi. They think rubber suits. They think cardboard flying saucers dangling from fishing wire. They think camp, and sure, some of it was, but the films on this list are different. These are the 15 films that got under your skin and stayed there, and I promise you, by the time we reach number 1, you'll be adding at least 5 of these to your watch list tonight. Number 15, The Man from Planet X, 1951. Before the day the Earth stood still, before The Thing from Another World, before any of the iconic alien invasion films that defined 1950s science fiction, there was a tiny picture made by a disgraced director on borrowed sets with a leading man who got paid less than a parking attendant. The Man from Planet X beat every major alien film of 1951 to theaters, and it did it on a budget so small it barely qualified as a rounding error in Hollywood accounting. Edgar G. Ulmer was the man behind the camera. The production budget was roughly $41,000. And here's the thing. The alien in this film communicates with humans through musical tones, an idea so ahead of its time that Steven Spielberg would borrow it 26 years later for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Behind the scenes, Ulmer shot the entire picture in 6 working days at Hal Roach Studios, using leftover sets from the 1948 Ingrid Bergman epic, Joan of Arc. He pumped artificial fog across those medieval backdrops to transform them into misty Scottish moors. And he personally designed the alien spaceship, the moon backdrop, and the glass matte paintings to save money on additional crew. And yet The Man from Planet X grossed $1.2 million at the box office. Number 14, Donovan's Brain, 1953. The man who wrote the screenplay for The Wolfman was a Jewish refugee who fled Nazi Germany in 1933 after hearing an anti-Semitic tirade by Joseph Goebbels. His name was Kurt Siodmak. He arrived in Hollywood with almost nothing, worked his way into Universal Studios through a connection with director Joe May, and proceeded to shape the horror genre for an entire generation. But it was a novel he published in 1942 that would become his most enduring legacy. The novel was first adapted as The Lady and the Monster in 1944, but it was this 1953 version that became the definitive film. And here's the thing, Siodmak himself was originally set to direct, but studio politics pushed him aside and the job went to Felix Feist. The lead role of Dr. Patrick Corey went to Lew Ayres. Ayres had starred in the original All Quiet on the Western Front in 1930, and the experience of playing a young soldier destroyed by war turned him into a real-life pacifist. When World War II broke out, he declared himself a conscientious objector. Hollywood and the American public turned on him overnight. Theaters pulled his films. His career appeared to be finished. But Ayres volunteered as a non-combat medic and chaplain's aide, served in the Pacific under fire, and eventually earned his way back into the industry. By 1953, Ayres brought a quiet intensity to the role that elevated the entire film. Watching him shift from a gentle, principled scientist to a man possessed by the cold ruthlessness of a dead tycoon is the performance that holds this picture together till this day. Number 13, X the Unknown, 1956. After Hammer Films struck gold with the Quatermass experiment in 1955, the studio was desperate for a follow-up. But Neil, who created the character of Professor Quatermass, refused to let anyone else write original stories using his creation. So, at a script meeting in autumn 1955, producers Anthony Hines and Michael Carreras sat down with their production manager, a man named Jimmy Sangster, and told him to come up with something new. Sangster pointed out that he was not a writer. Hammer's response, according to Sangster himself, was blunt. "Come up with ideas. If we like them, we pay you. If we don't, we won't. You're already on payroll as production manager, so you can't complain." Sangster went away and wrote a screenplay about a primordial radioactive creature that emerges from deep beneath the Earth rather than from outer space. It was his first script. The production budget was set at roughly $60,000. But the real drama happened behind the camera. Hammer originally hired Joseph Losey to direct. Losey was a talented American filmmaker who had been placed on the Hollywood blacklist for alleged communist ties and had fled to England to rebuild his career, working under the alias Joseph Walton. When Jagger discovered the true identity of his director, he refused to work with him. Jagger was a conservative and a devout Mormon, and the idea of being directed by a blacklisted communist sympathizer was something he would not tolerate. Losey was removed from the picture roughly a week into shooting. The official excuse was illness. Number 12. Fiend Without a Face, 1958. In the summer of 1958, a glass display case appeared on the sidewalk outside the Rialto Theater in Times Square. Inside it, a creature that looked like a human brain with a spinal cord tail and stalked eyes writhed and pulsed and made a wet, slithering noise that stopped pedestrians dead in their tracks. The crowd that gathered grew so large that New York City police ordered the display removed because it was creating a public disturbance. That creature was a prop from a low-budget British film called Fiend Without a Face, and the controversy was only just getting started. The budget started around £50,000. Behind the scenes, German special effects artist K.L. Ruppel created fully stop-motion animated brain creatures, a technique almost unheard of at this budget level. When the creatures are shot, they writhe and convulse, spurting blood across walls in sequences so graphic that the British Board of Film Censors demanded cuts before granting the film an X certificate. In fact, it was so intense that questions were raised in Parliament asking why British censors had allowed the film to be released at all. And here's the thing. Producer Gordon's response to all of it was magnificent. When Fiend Without a Face opened, it grossed $650,000 on its initial theatrical run. Number 11. It, The Terror from Beyond Space, 1958. 21 years before a creature burst out of John Hurt's chest in a corporate spaceship dining room, a low-budget film about an alien stowaway picking off astronauts one by one was playing to packed drive-in theaters across America. That film was It, The Terror from Beyond Space, and its DNA runs so deep through Ridley Scott's Alien that entire essays have been written about whether Scott's 1979 masterpiece is essentially a big-budget remake. The script was written by Jerome Bixby. Behind the scenes, director Edward L. Kahn shot It in approximately 6 days, relying on tight framing and claustrophobic interiors to create a sense of relentless escalation as the creature drives the surviving crew upward through the ship, deck by deck. The creature was designed and built by Paul Blaisdell. And here's the thing, the iconic suit in this film caused nothing but problems on set. Actor Ray Crash Corrigan, a former gorilla suit performer making his final screen appearance, refused to travel to Blaisdell's studio for proper measurements. The headpiece did not fit, leaving Corrigan's chin protruding through the mouth opening. Blaisdell had to improvise, patching in latex and painting the exposed chin to resemble the monster's tongue. Corrigan could barely see through the eye holes, and there is a visible moment in the film where he lifts the entire head to readjust his sightline. He also showed up drunk on set multiple times, refused to follow certain directions from Kahn, and damaged the suit badly enough that Blaisdell had to attend to emergency repairs. Despite all of this, the film works. Number 10. Invaders from Mars, 1953. Invaders from Mars was produced by Edward L. Alperson on a budget of roughly $290,000 and distributed by 20th Century Fox. It was originally planned to be shot in 3D. Instead, Menzies shot it in Super Cinecolor, and production was deliberately rushed into late 1952 so the film could premiere in April 1953, months ahead of Paramount's War of the Worlds. On paper, that strategic timing gave it clear air in a market that was about to become extremely crowded. But here's the thing. What makes this film hold up is not the aliens. What holds up is the perspective. On screen, the Martian mutants have visible zippers on their costumes, and the lead alien looks like a head in a fishbowl. Menzies chose to tell the entire story through the eyes of a child, and he used every design trick he had learned over 3 decades to make that perspective feel genuinely nightmarish.
Move it! Move it, for Christ's sake!
The sets are deliberately constructed with distorted proportions. Hallways stretch too far. Ceilings loom too high. Fences and walls appear at angles that feel subtly wrong. This was Menzies pioneering a technique called forced perspective, building physical sets and using camera angles to exaggerate depth and spatial relationships so the viewer experiences the world the way a frightened child would. The saddest part is that Menzies died of cancer in 1957, just 4 years after this film's release. He was 60 years old. Number 9. Tarantula, 1955. Director Jack Arnold once explained why he made this film in the simplest possible terms. He said they decided to do it because, generally, people are very afraid of spiders. He was not wrong. Tarantula earned $1.1 million in US and Canadian rentals for Universal Pictures, making it one of the studio's reliable earners for 1955. And here's the thing. Arnold was already the undisputed king of 1950s creature features by the time he started this project. What separates Tarantula from other sci-fi films in 1954 is the special effects work of Clifford Stein and David S. Horsley. Rather than building expensive mechanical props like the giant puppet ants, Stein used a live tarantula filmed separately and composited onto landscape footage through optical printing and matte photography. The result was startlingly convincing. Watching the spider crawl over ridgelines and across desert highways carried a weight and naturalism that rubber models could never achieve. Number 8. The Quatermass Experiment, 1955. Before Hammer films became synonymous with Gothic horror, before Christopher Lee's Dracula and Peter Cushing's Frankenstein turned a small British studio into a global brand, there was a single film that changed everything. It was based on a BBC television serial that had paralyzed the nation 2 years earlier, and its title was deliberately misspelled as a marketing stunt that ranks among the shrewdest in cinema history. The production budget was around £42,000. And here's the thing. The original show, The Quatermass Experiment, had aired on BBC television in 1953, and it terrified Britain so thoroughly that streets reportedly emptied on broadcast nights. Hammer Films saw an opportunity and capitalized on it. But here's the thing. Partly because of concerns raised by the censors, and partly on account of the low budget, director Val Guest kept the creature largely off-screen for much of the film, feeling that audiences' imaginations would fill in the blanks more effectively than he and the special effects team could deliver on screen. That restraint is exactly what makes the film so effective till today. Number 7. Them, 1954. Warner Brothers originally planned to make this film in color, in 3D, and with the giant ants rendered in a terrifying shade of purplish green. Then the studio slashed the budget days before filming began. Out went the color, out went the 3D, and what remained was a stark black and white production that accidentally became one of the most effective monster films ever made. And here's the thing, Them was the first giant bug movie. On paper, the cast sells the premise with absolute conviction. James Whitmore, Edmund Gwenn, Joan Weldon, James Arness. Behind the scenes, the giant ants were built as full-scale mechanical puppets by studio technicians, operated through elaborate lever and pulley systems. They were stiff, they were limited in their range of motion, and yet they worked. The sound design alone is a masterclass. The ants' shrieking calls were created using recordings of tree frogs mixed with warbler and woodpecker calls, captured by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in Georgia in 1947. When Them opened, it grossed $2.2 million in domestic rentals by the end of its theatrical run. Number 6. The Blob, 1958. Steve McQueen was 28 years old, nearly broke, and desperate enough for rent money that he turned down an offer that would have made him rich. The producers of a low-budget science fiction film shooting in rural Pennsylvania gave him a choice. Take a flat fee of $3,000 for the lead role, or accept a smaller payment up front in exchange for 10% of the film's profits. McQueen took the $3,000 because he needed to eat. The Blob went on to gross $4 million at the box office. The budget was set at $120,000, but came in at roughly $110,000. During production, the Blob itself was created by special effects technician Bart Sloan using silicone and red dye. For the iconic scene of the blob consuming a diner, Sloan placed a photograph of the building on a gyroscopically operated table, mounted cameras above it, shook the table, and let the silicone roll off the photograph. When the film negative was printed in reverse, it appeared as though the blob was oozing over the building. It is the kind of low-budget ingenuity that no amount of CGI can replicate. Number 5. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. The story of Creature from the Black Lagoon begins not on a film set, but at a dinner party. In 1941, producer William Alland was attending a dinner party during the filming of Citizen Kane when Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa told him about the myth of a race of half-fish, half-human creatures in the Amazon River. Alland filed that story away in his memory for a decade. When he finally wrote it down, it became one of the most enduring monster movies ever put on film. The production budget was under $500,000. Behind the scenes, the Gill Man was designed by an artist named Millicent Patrick. Patrick sketched, designed, and oversaw the creation of the creature from concept to finished suit. The design took months to finalize. Earlier versions were more fish-like, but Patrick pushed toward a humanoid look with gills, scales, and webbed claws that gave the creature both menace and tragic beauty.
Got him. We got him! Don't kill him! What happened?
When Universal sent her on a press tour billed as the beauty who created the beast, Bud Westmore was furious. Westmore demanded she stop taking credit and instead claimed she had only made sketch renderings of his ideas. After the tour ended, Westmore used his position to have Patrick effectively blackballed from the industry. He took sole screen credit for the design. Creature from the Black Lagoon opened and grossed over $3 million, earning back many times its production cost. Number 4. The Incredible Shrinking Man, 1957. Richard Matheson wrote the novel that this film is based on while sitting on a bus in 1955, watching a man walk past wearing a hat that seemed too big for his head. That single observation sparked one of the most philosophically ambitious science fiction stories of the 20th century. And when Universal turned it into a film, they spent $750,000 to bring it to screen. And here's the thing. Universal's technicians worked for 8 months prior to filming to develop a revolutionary film process for the special effects, and the production was put on hold twice during that time. Behind the scenes, the effects team worked with extraordinary ingenuity under tight financial constraints. Some scenes in which the lead character is only inches high were shot without special photography, using giant props such as the 12-foot-long sewing pin that Scott uses to kill the spider. For the water effects, the crew needed a way to create massive, convincing water droplets on camera. Jack Arnold later told the story of how the solution came from a crew member who quietly admitted he had a condom. They filled it with water, tied it, and dropped it. It had the exact tear shape they needed and splattered perfectly on impact. Arnold ordered roughly 100 gross of them. When the production office later reviewed expenses and found the item on the budget, Arnold simply told them it was a very tough picture, so he had given a cast party, and said nothing more. When The Incredible Shrinking Man opened, the film grossed $1.43 million in the United States and Canada, and was among the highest-grossing science fiction films of the 1950s. Number 3. The Fly, 1958. Kurt Newman produced and directed The Fly for 20th Century Fox and died shortly after its premiere. The film went on to become the studio's highest-grossing picture of 1958, earning roughly $3 million at the box office. It turned Vincent Price into a horror icon. It spawned 2 sequels, and 28 years later, David Cronenberg remade it into one of the most acclaimed horror films of the 1980s. The total production budget was around $495,000. The shoot lasted just 18 days. But here's the thing. The film's power comes not from its monster, but from its tragedy. The Fly's head built for Hedison was a 20-pound construction that gave him almost no peripheral vision and made performing in it nearly impossible. Hedison compared it to trying to play the piano with boxing gloves on. Makeup artist Ben Nye later wrote that despite working on many subsequent science fiction films, he never did anything as sophisticated or original as that creature design.
You'll be all right now. I know it's worked!
During a key philosophical scene, every time the small voice of the trapped fly cried out, "Help me! Help me!" the entire cast would collapse in laughter. It took roughly 20 takes to get through it. That accidental comedy inside a scene of genuine horror says everything about how delicate the film's emotional balance actually was. Number 2. The Thing from Another World, 1951. There is a debate that has raged for over 70 years about who actually directed this film, though the credit goes to Christian Nyby. But nearly everyone who worked on it has said, on and off the record, that the real director was Howard Hawks. Hawks produced the film through his Winchester Pictures Corporation. He gave Nyby only $5,460 out of the $50,000 director's fee paid by RKO and kept the rest. Hawks always publicly denied directing the film, but his fingerprints are on every frame. The overlapping dialogue, the ensemble camaraderie under pressure, the understated romanticism. And here's the thing. Hawks originally titled the film simply The Thing, but added From Another World late in production to avoid confusion with a novelty song of the same name that was a hit single in 1950. Behind the scenes, the creature itself cost $40,000 to design and build. Arness was enormous at 6 feet 7 inches, and the makeup transformed him into a towering, silent, plant-based alien that feeds on blood. The Thing from Another World opened and grossed $1.95 million in domestic rentals. Number 1. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. Walter Wanger was convicted in 1951 of shooting talent agent Jennings Lang, whom he suspected of having an affair with his wife, actress Joan Bennett. Wanger served 4 months, and when he returned to the industry, no major studio would touch him. He ended up at Allied Artists making B-movies, and it was there that he produced the single greatest science fiction film of the 1950s. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was budgeted at $416,911. Don Siegel was hired to direct. Behind the scenes, Siegel had originally included several humorous touches in his final cut, which the studio, Allied Artists, later edited out without his approval. The real battle, though, was over the ending. The original ending did not include the flashback framing and ended with Miles screaming as truckloads of pods passed him on the road. On the other hand, the studio demanded a framing device, bookend scenes set in a hospital that softened the ending and implied that help was coming. Siegel fought it. He lost. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was released on a double bill and grossed $3 million, nearly 7 times its budget. And that brings us to the end of our countdown. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a countdown. And drop a comment below telling us which of these films creeped you out the most. We will see you in the next one.